For my VRA assignment, I did a second grade lesson focused on the story of the Three Little Pigs. So I started the lesson by having them talk about the original story, and then I read the true story of the Three Little Pigs, which was told from the perspective of the wolf.
All right. So this is the true story of the Three Little Pigs. I will. Everybody knows the story
So
of the
after I
three
finished
little
reading
pigs
this, then I
when
had the
facing a bear.
students compare
When
the
I
two
was doing on
versions,
a
so the
little
original
kid,
version with this
nobody
version
knows
that we
the
read,
real
and then I
story because
introduced the project
nobody
for
has
the
ever
day
heard
where
mine.
students would be able to create their own version of the story by creating either a skit or a
I'm
storybook.
the
So my first differentiation for this was environment by readiness, and the strategy I used was homogeneous grouping. I chose to group students in their typical reading groups. My CT already has students grouped, so the boxers were the below grade level group, the panthers and the tigers were the on grade level group, and the kittens were the above grade level group. I felt that the students would work better with the people they were used to working with. Additionally, I worried that if I paired an AGL student with a BGL student, then the BGL student wouldn't get a chance to voice their opinion and contribute to the group. When I started pairing them, which is at this point in the lesson, you can already see
okay.
that rationale didn't really
Okay,
seem to
just go
work
sit right
because
now.
each group continued to talk
Cameron,
over
go
each other
sit.
anyway from
Okay,
the very
box your things
beginning,
up and
which was a
go sit
weakness
at
of
that
this
table.
strategy.
And Mrs.
If I could have
Frank's
had
gonna
another group, adult there with
wait
the
till after you.
AGL group, I think it would have gone a lot smoother. So in the future, I would pair the
Okay,
students with just
Chase.
one partner so that everyone could have
Okay,
their voice
what?
heard.
Calm down,
And I would also
Cameron.
pair
All right.
heterogeneously so that AGL students could
So
help the
everybody sit in
BGL
a circle.
students with the
Riley, sit in
writing.
a circle,
I
please.
do think that one advantage of grouping them in
Okay.
the larger groups
All
made
right.
it
We're
easier
done.
for
Clap
me
higher.
as the teacher to
Clap
spend
higher.
more time with a larger number of students
Okay.
so that they could all get the support
You
at the
guys
same
want me to
time.
create a story?
My second differentiation was product by interests, and I did a menu of options. It could be argued that this was learner profile, but I chose interest because they could choose the one that was the most interesting idea to them. So as you can see on my direction sheet here, I allowed each group to choose to create a skit or a storybook. So on this sheet, it has both options. So it has our skit, our storybook, and it tells them everything that they're going to need to do in order to complete that task. I noticed that my class almost always has problems focusing and not staying on tasks with their assignments. So I just thought that by allowing them to choose their assignment based on what interested them, they would be a little bit more invested and stay on task better. I think that the biggest strength of this differentiation strategy is that the students were invested in the task. Even though they may have been yelling and arguing, they were always arguing about what was going to be happening in their skit. Ideally, they would have worked together a little bit more cooperatively, but I do think that I succeeded in creating a task that they were excited about, even though that they just became so excited that it was overwhelming for both them and for me. However, for the rest of the day, they all kept talking about how much fun they had and wanting to change their characters, and that was really great for me to hear. I do think that the students who got the chance to rehearse their skit really had a great time doing it, and for me, it was really fun to watch. One weakness, aside from the fact that the students didn't work well together, was that I couldn't really
Okay,
predict what the
Michael, you
students
guys
were
go
going to
ahead.
pick. I was
I
so
got it.
sure that at least one group would pick the storybook, which was the task that I knew wouldn't need
All
as
right,
much
Michael,
guidance to
sit in this
complete.
line.
However, every single group chose the skit and needed help writing it, and I just didn't account for the fact that I
Uh-oh.
really couldn't help everyone at one time, and neither could my CT. So if I did it again, I'd probably add an additional option that was maybe done digitally because the students really wanted more technology involved. And I would also try and make sure that if I was grouping in this way, wouldn't choose a task that required as much support. So my third and final differentiation was process readiness, and my strategy was tier teacher support. My idea was that the AGL group would be able to complete the task.
Okay,
Oops,
new
sorry, I
line
forgot
set.
to pause this video. My idea was that the AGL group would be able to complete the task independently, um, with minimal support, and my CT was in agreement that it should have been a task they could handle. Then my CT and I would be able to provide the teacher support needed to the OGL and BGL groups. The plan was to walk the OGL and BGL groups through how to create a script or a storybook and then work with them to create it. So I created brainstorm sheets, how-to sheets, and templates for both the script and the storybook in order to support students. The goal was to provide the OGL and BGL additional instruction on specifically how to start working on whichever project they chose. One strength of this differentiation is that the groups I selected really did need the additional help. As you can see, even when they were with me, it was hard for them to have their full attention. They could really only focus and agree on something if I was there guiding them, and even then, they could hardly focus on me. Especially because the class as a whole has a hard time with giving anything their full attention, I really believe that the tier teacher support was necessary. However, I didn't really account for the fact that it was a possibility for the AGL students to not be able to handle working independently, which is one weakness of this strategy. I kind of panicked when I realized that they were having just as hard of a time focusing as my group was. From what I had seen from those students, I had really felt like they would be able to work together, but unfortunately they didn't. And at around, almost the end of the lesson, my teacher had to pull them aside to her own group, which you can see at this point in the video if it decides to load. So if I were to do it again, I would just assign the students the character so they could focus more on the content of the lesson rather than sitting there arguing about who they got to be. I also would probably provide the same support to everyone by splitting the lesson into a couple of days. First, talking about the story and how to write a script or storybook, then giving a day for brainstorming and starting their script, and then a day to finish their script and perform their skit. So really, I just tried to fit too much into an hour and couldn't provide the support to everyone because it turned out that all of them needed it. So it was really helpful to know that in the future, if I were to do a lesson like this, I should give everybody a similar amount of support.